Ancient teachings from around the world see family and community as containers for wisdom. The stability and connectivity of the family is seen as necessary to ensure that information travels intact from one's ancestors through the stable family into the community, where it's bundled and prepared to be sent as far into the future as possible. But for decades, a quiet war has been waged by globalists, communists, and social engineers with a single target in their sights: the traditional family unit. Can we rediscover this ancient ideal of family as a container for transmitting wisdom?
The culture has been at war with the family for as long as I can remember. And it is really why I got into this field in the first place. I knew it when I was in college, and that's been a long time ago, where I shared with my friends, the family is in trouble and we need to do what we can to make a difference. The family is under attack. And it is the ground floor, it's the foundation. The entire culture sits on that, and it has for 5,000 years. Our institutions, our government, our way of life, everything depends on the next generation, depends on the stability of the family. And if you undermine it, and if you weaken it, and if you make it difficult for it to function as our government does, and as the media and the culture at large, then the whole superstructure can come down. And that's what's happening now. The family is falling apart.
My name is Simon Esler, and I want to welcome you to SuperOrganism, the family unit. This is my exploration into the challenge of starting a family during an era of great change. I've always lived a pretty alternative life. I was very into counterculture as a youth. I'm now a vegan who eats organic. We homeschool our kids. We use primarily alternative and Eastern medicine. We don't vaccinate. I'm an ET experiencer and an all-around conspiracy theorist. So, when the COVID lockdowns hit, it opened my eyes to the plight of the modern family in new ways, and the importance of the family for our survival as a species, as a civilization, became clear. It caused me to look at my own new little family as something contained that was traveling through this turmoil. As I started to hear reports of stay-at-home orders causing a massive spike in domestic abuse, child abuse, and even child sex trafficking, I realized that this pandemic, as a New World Order operation, needed broken families to succeed. Now, I knew that communism had a history of destroying the family as a warfare tactic, and that through socialism, communism was being imported into North America more and more every year. But this all started to look like something larger in scope and far more sophisticated. The lockdowns had caused a specific scenario in which the stability of each family unit was going to be put to the absolute test. Families, each with their own instabilities, were bound to become pressure cooker scenarios, locked in the house with each other's karma, building to an explosion as mom and dad lose work and the kids lose their friendships and lifelines to the community. It woke me up to how crucial my ambitions to have a stable, loving family are, and how seriously I needed to take this. But when I went to do that inner work, I realized that I had not been raised in a culture that had instilled any meaningful ideals of what family even is. The notion of a traditional family, a mom, a dad, and some kids, living happily together, and this pattern repeating for multiple generations, is not only absent in our cultural landscape, but it's in the midst of being attacked as dangerous and offensive. And I realized on a deeper level that the lack of this ideal, of any solid family ideal in our culture, was due to the ongoing war on the family, and that fortunately, my life in conspiracy culture had already educated me on this pretty thoroughly. You see, as a resident of Toronto, one of the most meaningful documents I found, alluding directly to the war on the family unit, was a record of 2 New World Order meetings that occurred downtown Toronto, entitled the Toronto Protocols. Revisiting these documents after the lockdowns began hit home in more ways than one. The Toronto Protocols are a series of documents allegedly leaked by French intelligence to Canadian journalist Sergei Monast in March of 1995. Monast was already well known within alternative research communities and conspiracy culture as the journalist who had exposed Operation Bluebeam, a secret NASA operation involving engineered earthquakes, holograms in the sky, mass telepathy, and electronically faked religious apparitions. The documents themselves are the talking points from 2 meetings between a group of self-identified Luciferian global financiers who call themselves the 666. In the meetings, they discuss their past successes, current operations, and future ambitions for enslaving the global population under a new world order. The 666 group named their first Toronto meeting Bread and Circuses, in reference to the social engineering tactics used in ancient Rome, a major factor in its collapse. The second meeting, in 1985, was entitled The Red Wave, an ominous allusion to a massive onslaught of communist ideals being installed into the Western world through their stated warfare strategy. They state the design of their strategy as, quote, the genocide of the vital for the benefit and profit of the occult. Are the lockdowns one of the weapons being used to enforce this genocide? Are they a tool of the Red Wave? Lockdowns go against all prior medical standards in dealing with infectious diseases, even contradicting the Chinese-owned World Health Organization. In fact, lockdowns emerged directly from the same Fang Kong philosophy the CCP used to enslave, sterilize, and murder the Uyghurs. The importation of the lockdowns into North America was the importation of communist ideals. Given that the lockdowns themselves had no prior application in medical science and emerged uniquely as a Chinese communist creation, they seem more like a warfare operation designed to deliver a final blow against Western civilization than a public health strategy. In fact, it's become abundantly clear that the lockdowns were destructive in 2 primary ways: harm to the health and stability of families, and the degradation of the middle class. Is it coincidence that these are the 2 primary goals stated in the Toronto Protocol? Quote, to succeed with certainty to the construction of a world government, a new world order community, where all individuals, without exception, will be subject to the world state of the new order, we must first remove the family, which will in turn lead to the loss of ancestral religious teachings, and secondly, leveling all individuals by removing the social classes, in particular, the middle classes. Once I reread the Toronto Protocols, something profound hit me. These New World Order Satanists understood the importance of family well enough to attack it with great sophistication, while we didn't understand the importance of it well enough to protect it. The fact that they understood the family as a container for ancestral teachings ignited my own curiosity and led me to look more deeply into this idea. So my own inspiration for a new family ideal begins with the family's ability to retain and transmit wisdom. I found one of the best articulations of this concept with the Haudenosaunee idea of living for the 7th generation. This quote from the chair of the Haudenosaunee Standing Committee, Rick Hill Sr., articulated it best. If If you ask me what is the most important thing that I have learned about being a Haudenosaunee, it's the idea that we are connected to a community, but a community that transcends time. We're connected to the first Indians who walked on this earth, the very first ones, however long ago that was. But we're also connected to those Indians who aren't even born yet, who are going to walk this earth, and our job in the middle is to bridge that gap. You take the inheritance from the past, you add to it your ideas and your thinking, and you bundle it up and shoot it to the future. Don't just come here expecting to benefit, you come here to work hard so that the future can enjoy that benefit. The way Rich Hill is describing community here fascinated me because I see family as a nested fractal of community, and I can see that the Haudenosaunee culture clearly developed an ideal that was able to transcend time. I realized that what he was depicting scaled down perfectly to the family as a container outside of time as well. It triggered in me a sense of the family's spiritual purpose and potential as a point of connection between our past and our future. And the more stable the family, the more fluidly the family allows information to be gathered from the past, mixed with the present, and sent into the future. This is what ignited in me a new ideal for the family. What if we took this concept as far as possible? What if the family's capacity to harmoniously gather and protect wisdom was envisioned in its highest form? What elements of collective consciousness in the family would be expressed? What elements of collective creation are already built into the divine architecture of the family itself? And what if we began to imagine the family as a superorganism? So we'll start the journey here. It's time we fought back, and I feel that that begins with exploring and forming new cultural ideals that can uplift families around the world as the divine creations that they are. To me, cultural ideals are a tool for collective worship that can transcend religion because they represent a shared notion of perfection that's not meant to create judgment and exclusion, but constant guidance, constant improvement, and a shared focal point for effective co-creation. This is how I'm starting to see the family anew, a stable container to bundle ancestry and inheritance with our wisdom in the present, to be projected as far into the future as possible. But to explore this ideal as a response to the warfare that has so successfully destabilized the family, we need to better understand the war itself.
I first discovered the war in the family back when I was trying to figure out what the psychological underpinnings of the control mechanism actually is. Once I discovered that there was a control system, I wanted to know how it actually worked. How did it actually get people to participate in the control? Because unlike what happens historically, where the control system is kind of enforced onto a population directly, the control systems we have now are more hidden. People will actually, in a lot of ways, volunteer to participate in their own control, except they don't know it. And I realized that there had to be some type of subtle psychological, what we often refer to as social influencing or social programming mechanism, also referred to as mass mind control. I believe it was Ignatius Loyola who was discussing how if you gave him a child from 0 to 6, then he would have that person for the rest of their life. So I realized that there was a social influencing system that was directly targeting children. If you could get a child to be initiated into their own control, for lack of a better term, then that child would then participate as an agent of control for the rest of their life.
Because the child is in 100% programmable, hypnotic, psychedelic world. And its mother and father are God to it because it's feeding it. It's attentive to all of its needs. And what they want to do, these Luciferians, not the Satanists, the Luciferians, the ones who know and wield all of the secrets, they want to break that connection with your child.
So then I started to ask myself, well, how does this social control or child control system actually work? When I started to ask that question, I encountered sources like J. Parker and Sfali, who both claimed to be members of dynastic Illuminati families. What they said is that the most amount of trauma-based mind control, what we often refer to as monarch-based mind control, happened within these family circles. And so they use this kind of child initiation system on their own families. And so then it made me realize that actually what was happening is that the child was the kind of primary target of a lot of social influence and social control that we see, at least at an early age. And by extension, the influences that were around that child the most were the parents, the family, and then the influences of that family. So you can think about it, taking all that into consideration, that the child is the focus, the target of this mind influencing program.
If someone invented a new product, they would have to create a supply in order to create a brand new demand. And with regard to porn and sex has been around since the dawn of time, so there's always been a demand for it. But with regarding porn specifically, there seems to be an artificial inflation of the supply to not only attract and create new addicts in the system, specifically with children. Most young boys are getting into pornography around 13 years old, I believe is the average. But some much younger than that, and they're single digits. You know, this is long before they've ever hit puberty and long before the formative process of the brain has really reached a point where they're able to kind of understand what they're seeing. And so to a degree, there's trauma built into those early experiences. Any child who's exposed to sexual material at too young of an age inevitably is traumatized to one degree or another. So in some regards, this porn agenda, if you will, is really being pushed and propped up by Wall Street, which I explore in my film. It's really being pushed and promulgated to kind of create a generation of addicts, to create a generation of traumatized individuals, and of course to destabilize the nuclear family and traditional monogamous relationships.
For it must be confessed that nations which cannot count on a strong youth, a society where individuals are grouped around a common ideal, reinforced with walls of unwavering morals, which, historically, would have been able to provide support, cannot abdicate our global commitment. Our cultural notion of a traditional family unit is inarguably one of those common ideals. It's not hard to see that in the wake of cultural destruction created by woke politics, no large-scale common ideal has risen in place of the fallen family. Cultural concepts of the family have become intentionally vague. As a result of this subtle cultural warfare, a new generation of children have been left with the message that any family ideal that emerges more strongly and gathers more cultural power than another, even if it is being naturally uplifted by the majority, is inherently hateful. Over the decades since the 666 group laid out their plans in downtown Toronto, the Marxist Trojan horses of gender politics and critical race theory have continued to infiltrate media, government, military, and educational institutions.
I think that universities do more harm than good now, but the postmodern collectivist doctrine is so psychologically and politically toxic. For the postmodernist collective types, there is no such thing as an individual. The war that's going on philosophically in the campuses is far deeper than you think. The idea that human beings are made in the image of God, most fundamentally, that is what's being attacked. The idea of the sovereignty of the individual. If you don't have the idea of the sovereignty of the individual, all you are is an avatar of your group interests. It is truly an assault on the most fundamental principles by which the West is governed. It's not surface level philosophy. It goes all the way to the bottom.
For young, immature minds, ready to stand in opposition to their parents' generation. This seems like a normal, progressive motion. The generational impulse to oppose old systems of power is extremely natural and deeply written into our ancestral memory. The removal of a stable family ideal and the triggering of this ancient impulse in the youth has led, with startling precision, to the exact form of social chaos described in the plans outlined in the Toronto Protocol. This sexual liberation is the ultimate means by which we will be able to get rid of the conscience of the people, a reference to good and evil. The collapse of the moral and religious barriers will allow us to complete the process of the false liberation of man from his past, but which in reality is a form of slavery that will benefit our globalist plans. The door opened for the encouragement of sexual liberty, to divorce, to abortion on demand, various forms of legal recognition of homosexuality, will help us to fundamentally alter the historical basis of the legal rights of societies, to destroy the future of the youth, pushing for damaging experiences of early sexuality and abortion, to break the morality of future generations. If children cannot form stable identities and are hypersexualized from a young age, the impact is the death of stable families and the loss of transgenerational knowledge.